was born Mary Elizabeth Fahy in a place called Ballyannin, Gort, County Galway. Now Ballyannin wouldn't be that well known, but it's only half a mile from Ballylee, where Yeats owned. He bought it for £35 in 1917, and he lived there. My father knew him. In fact, my father often brought him down in the pony trap from Ballylee down to his friend Lady Augusta Gregory in Coole Park. And Yeats did write beautiful poetry. And we're very proud of the fact that most of his best poetry was written in the parish of Kiltartan, between Ballylee and Coole Park, where he spent his summers with his friend Lady Gregory. So Yeats again was arguably Ireland's best poet, but he wasn't one who would make small talk with the locals. And he'd get into the pony trap, not a word. But sometimes you'd hear sounds from him, like that, composing. It isn't that, some people say he was a snob. I don't think so. It's just he lived in a parallel universe, a different world, and wrote wonderful poetry. So I was the eldest of the family. I grew up on a farm, and when I was 5.5, which was rather old now, I went to Kiltartan National School, the famous red brick building authorised by Sir William Gregory at Kiltartan Cross. So the red brick, which is now, through our efforts, the Kiltartan Gregory Museum. So I spent 7 years there, happy years. And then when I was in 6th class, my mother thought that I should learn a bit of music. So she bought a piano from her savings, children's allowance savings. So the first time I ever met a nun, a Mercy sister, we called them nuns that time, was in 1948, and Sister Angela was teaching me piano. So the next year then, 1949, I went to the secondary school in Gort, small secondary school. They had a few boarders, and Mother Stanislaus was the principal. She also was the novice mistress, one of the greatest women I've ever known. I owe her an awful lot. She taught science and what was called domestic science, as well as being principal and novice mistress. So I was 5 years there, and I did the Leaving Cert in 1954, and had I thought of being a sister? I had. I always wanted to be a teacher. Nothing else but a teacher, a communicator, shall we say. So I did the Leaving Cert, and I could have gone to Mary I Training College, but I got a call training, but something told me, was drawing me to Mercy. So, to make a long story short, I entered the Convent of Mercy Court in October 1954, the Marine year. I got a year's sabbatical then. And instead, as any good Mercy nun would do, instead of doing a spiritual course in Milltown, I studied local history sources, the National Library, National Archives, any place. I was gathering information on mostly South Galway and all that area. Well, in the meantime, in 1972, I had done a master's, and for the thesis it was education in the Diocese of Kilmacduagh in the 19th century, and that was 1972. And I got Father Martin Cohen, who was the diocesan historian, to have a look at it, and he said, that has to be published, because there was information there that was never revealed before. At least he didn't know about it. So that was published in 1973. So that was my first foray into communication, publications. I was always interested in genealogy. I got it from my mother, and her mother was very good, and my mother's sister, Auntie Bridie, who never married and had time to connect with everyone else. So I was very interested in that. And then, not just family genealogy, I sat down one day, and Kiltartan, which is a half parish of Gort, there are two parts, Kilmacdo, Kiltartan, I wrote out the names of every family that lived in every townland in Kiltartan, and I traced them back about 200 years. So, see, at that time, one had to go to Dublin to get a lot of the sources. So I was traipsing up and down to Dublin, and now a lot of it is online. Click of a mouse and you have it. But all the sources there. So about 10 years ago, Mike Feerick, Irish-American, was at a meeting in Farmley in Dublin, and people were asked, how do we boost the Irish economy again? And various suggestions were made, and David Williams, the economist, David said, what about connecting with the Irish diaspora? And millions of them, I may not have the right figure, but at least 70 million worldwide are of Irish descent. So to make a long story short, a pilot project was set up in East Galway, South East Galway and South West Galway. And we had a week of welcomes in the year 2011. And the first person to came was somebody I had contact with who left Kiltartan. His ancestor left Kiltartan in 1849. He was the first. So since that time, then the government 2 years later started the gathering. I understand they're considering having it again. And then, of course, the recession affected things, and now COVID, of course, it's all that. But even though some of them aren't able to come back, they're able to connect, online. So there's hardly a week there isn't a query. But a lot of the sources are put online now by Ireland Reaching Out, IRO. And so they don't have to ask us as many questions because they can get the information once they have the sources. And I find it very interesting. Each parish has a coordinator, as it were. And I won't be able to do as much anymore, so. Anything you do for people, I believe, is mercy. And the traditional works of mercy, which was founded by Catherine Macaulay, they are different today. And you have to adapt to situations and requirements. You can't be doing today's work with yesterday's tools, as it were. And I feel that it is a work of mercy. And I know that the original people who emigrated, they couldn't afford to come back. But their descendants now are very interested. And one group are third cousins we discovered from New Zealand. To make a long story short, I spent a week there in the year 2005. And since that, 12 different groups, the way a family expands down, have come to Ireland. And even when Ireland were playing the All Blacks in Chicago and defeated them, I was getting emails during the game. We're delighted Ireland is doing well. If anyone has to beat the All Blacks, let it be Ireland. by people whose great-grandfather left in 1865. They were still Irish to the core. Which brings me to the care of the earth. I mean, our common home, you know. We weren't really, I suppose it took possibly Pope Francis and his Laudato Si encyclical to make most people aware. It isn't a question just of being tidy and clean and, you know, care of the earth, obviously, but the spirituality behind it, the universe and so on, which many people thought was an aside, that it wasn't, you know, part of, we'll say, the traditional Christianity, as it were, but it's an integral part of it, I think. You know, many people were kind of afraid of it, that where is Christ in all of this? But the more we studied, the more I see that the incarnation has a wider meaning than just what happened 2,000 years ago, as it were. So I'm learning, just learning all the time.